It all started with a bright yellow sticky note on my front door. No envelope, no signature, just a bold, underlined message that read, "You're in violation of HOA regulations. Fix this immediately." At first, I laughed it off. I figured it was a mistake. I mean, I mow my lawn, keep the trash cans tucked away, and even power wash my driveway more than my neighbors do. So what violation could they possibly be talking about? Then the letters started coming. Printed, formal-looking ones this time, accusing me of everything from improper fence height to unapproved seasonal decorations. I checked the HOA rules. Not a single thing I was being accused of was actually against the guidelines. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. This was personal. Enter Karen *. Not her real name, but you know the type. She recently got herself elected to the HOA board and immediately crowned herself queen of the neighborhood. Clipboard in hand, she patrolled the block like it was a crime scene. I even caught her peeking over fences and snapping pictures like she was building a case file. Every week, a new letter, a new complaint. It felt less like living in a community and more like being stuck in a suburban police state. I tried to reason with her. Big mistake. She doubled down. Started calling me out in front of other neighbors, acting like I was some menace to the neighborhood just because I had a garden gnome or left my garage door open too long. That's when I decided enough was enough. If she was going to play the rulebook card, then I'd read that book cover to cover and find every single page she'd violated herself. What I found, let's just say Karen wasn't nearly as rule-abiding as she pretended to be. And once I gathered the proof, I didn't just fight back. I used her own favorite tool against her. But the way it all unraveled, even I didn't expect what happened next. Karen had been on the HOA board for barely 3 months, but you'd think she'd been running the neighborhood for years. People used to wave and chat in their yards. Now, everyone avoided eye contact, quietly wondering if they'd be next on her list. What made it worse was how sneaky she was about it. Nothing ever came directly from her. It was always a letter or an anonymous neighbor complaint that just happened to match her handwriting on those first notes. At first, I figured maybe she was just overzealous, one of those people who takes things too seriously. But the more I watched, the clearer it became. Karen wasn't enforcing the rules. She was using them to control people. She'd target certain neighbors, mostly the ones who didn't agree with her or didn't attend HOA meetings. Meanwhile, her own lawn looked like it hadn't been mowed in weeks, and she had string lights hanging year-round, both against HOA guidelines, by the way. I started keeping track. I even took pictures, not in a weird way, just enough to document what I saw. I compared every letter she sent me to the HOA rulebook, and then I dug into past meeting minutes. That's when I noticed something strange. Some of the rules she was quoting didn't exist at all. Others had been voted down months ago, before she ever joined the board. She was making things up, or worse, twisting old rules to fit whatever she wanted to happen. The breaking point came when she tried to fine me for parking in my own driveway overnight. That's when I knew she wasn't just being strict. She was trying to push me out, or at least make my life miserable. And based on what I was hearing from other neighbors, I wasn't the only one she'd been targeting. So I decided to dig deeper. I requested access to the HOA's financial records and board communications, which, by the way, homeowners are legally allowed to see. And what I found hidden in all that paperwork, that's when the real story started to come together. And trust me, things were about to get messy. Once I got access to the HOA records, I started noticing patterns, convenient little decisions that always seemed to benefit Karen or her inner circle. For example, she approved her own request to build a backyard shed that clearly exceeded the size limits in the HOA guidelines. Meanwhile, she denied my neighbor's nearly identical request just a week later. No explanation, no warning, just a cold letter with a stamp and a fine. Then there were the board meeting notes, some of them missing, others edited strangely. The attendance logs didn't match up, and there were entire discussions about new rules that were never actually voted on. It looked like Karen and a couple of her friends had started holding unofficial meetings and making decisions without the rest of the board. That's a huge violation of HOA bylaws, and potentially legal ones too. I started talking to other neighbors quietly, trying not to raise suspicion. Turns out, several people had been hit with similar random complaints. One guy got a warning about his holiday wreath. Another was fined for leaving his recycling bin out past pickup, even though it was empty and out of sight. It all felt targeted, petty, personal, and Karen was always at the center of it. One of the more eye-opening conversations I had was with an elderly couple down the street, sweet folks who had lived here since the community was built. They told me Karen had shown up at their door, clipboard in hand, and advised them to remove their bench from the front yard for safety reasons. They were so intimidated they just did it, didn't even ask questions. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just breaking rules. She was counting on people not knowing their rights. The deeper I dug, the more twisted it all seemed. There was even talk of her trying to push through a new landscaping fee, something that had been voted down last year, but suddenly showed up again in the next month's budget draft. None of it made sense unless you realized one thing. Karen was running the HOA like her personal kingdom, and I wasn't the only one ready to challenge the throne. Once I realized how deep this went, I knew I couldn't take her down alone. I needed backup. So I started organizing quiet meetups with other neighbors, just a few people at first, folks I knew had received bogus violation letters or shady fines. We met at the local park, away from our homes, just in case Karen or one of her allies was keeping tabs. And one by one, people started sharing stories, similar patterns, same wording in letters, the same feeling of being targeted and powerless, but now we weren't alone. We formed a small group and started collecting evidence. Photos, emails, HOA meeting notes, copies of complaint letters. Everything was organized into a folder that just kept growing. It was one thing to hear someone say Karen was abusing her power. It was another to see it all laid out, clear as day. She had been selectively enforcing rules, ignoring formal procedures, and possibly misusing HOA funds. But going public was risky. Karen had a grip on the board, and anyone who questioned her got immediate attention, letters, fines, even public shaming during HOA meetings. Still, we planned our next move carefully. We knew we needed to catch her in a lie, something undeniable and tied directly to the HOA rulebook. Because if we were going to challenge her, it had to be with her own favorite weapon, the rules. So we reviewed every HOA bylaw, line by line. That's when we found it, an obscure clause that most people overlooked. It detailed a process for removing a board member for misconduct, including bypassing a full board vote if there was documented evidence of abuse of power. The catch: it needed a petition signed by a specific percentage of homeowners. That became our mission. We printed the petition, quietly started collecting signatures, and kept everything under the radar. But word travels fast in a neighborhood like ours, and just a few days into it, Karen got wind that something was happening behind the scenes. That week, 3 of us got new violation letters, completely bogus, again. One person even had their mailbox tagged for improper height, which wasn't even in the handbook. It was obvious she was panicking. She knew something was coming, but she didn't know how close we were. And just when we thought we had everything under control, she made a move none of us expected, something that nearly tore the whole plan apart. Just when we thought we were steps away from finally holding Karen accountable, the unexpected happened. An emergency HOA meeting was announced, scheduled just 2 days out. No prior notice, no agenda. Just a message sent late at night from the HOA email address, claiming urgent neighborhood matters needed to be addressed. We all knew what this was. Karen was trying to get ahead of us. But what we didn't know was how far she was willing to go to protect her power. That night before the meeting, I got a knock at my door. It wasn't a letter this time. It was one of Karen's close allies on the board, someone who hadn't spoken to me in months. He acted friendly, overly so, saying he just wanted to talk. But within 5 minutes, he started asking pointed questions. If I'd been speaking with neighbors, if I was aware of any unrest, and if I knew anything about a petition being circulated. It felt less like a chat and more like an interrogation wrapped in a smile. I didn't answer much, just kept my cool and let him talk. But his visit confirmed what we feared. Karen had caught wind of the petition and was now trying to flush it out before we could act. And then the twist we never saw coming hit. Karen filed a formal complaint against me to the HOA board, accusing me of harassment and coordinated neighborhood disruption. She claimed I was bullying other residents into signing a false petition and spreading misinformation. It was wild, totally made up, but it worked to her advantage. Now, she had a reason to call for a vote to suspend my rights to attend HOA meetings until an investigation was done. That meant I wouldn't be able to speak at the emergency meeting or challenge her directly in front of the board. She was trying to silence me, legally. The news spread fast. Some neighbors pulled back, worried they might be next. Others grew more fired up. But the pressure was on. With the petition deadline closing in and Karen digging in deeper, everything was coming to a head. What we didn't know was that Karen had one more card up her sleeve, and if it worked, everything we'd built could collapse in seconds. The emergency HOA meeting was packed. More people showed up than I'd ever seen at one of these before. It was standing room only, neighbors squeezed into folding chairs and against walls, all whispering, all waiting. Karen sat at the front with her usual smug expression, flanked by 2 board members who seemed just as rattled as the rest of us. The moment the meeting opened, she launched straight into her accusations, calling me out by name, claiming I was spreading lies, intimidating residents, and trying to destabilize the neighborhood. I wasn't supposed to be allowed to speak, but that plan backfired. One of the board members, someone who'd always seemed neutral, cut her off and asked for proof. She had none. Just hearsay and vague statements. And that's when I stood up, petition in hand, with over 70% of the required signatures. I laid out everything: photos, records, emails, board decisions made without quorum, fake violations. The whole neighborhood saw it. I didn't yell, I didn't point fingers. I just let the facts speak for themselves. The room shifted. People who'd once been silent started nodding, whispering to each other. Then more neighbors stood up, one by one, backing me up, sharing their own stories. It turned into a wave. You could see Karen's face change, her confidence cracking as the truth closed in on her. By the time I read the specific clause in the HOA bylaws about board removal due to misconduct, it was over. A motion was made, a vote was taken, and just like that, Karen was removed from the HOA board, effective immediately. People clapped, some even cheered. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt united again. But just when we thought the storm had passed, one final twist came out. As the board started reviewing Karen's past approvals and transactions, they uncovered something big: unauthorized expenses. Thousands of dollars in HOA funds had been moved around under her name. Landscaping fees that were never paid. A community improvement project that never existed. It looked like she hadn't just been abusing power, she might have been misusing funds the entire time. That turned everything from a neighborhood feud into a full-on investigation. And while we had won the battle, it looked like Karen's story was far from over. After Karen's removal, the board immediately called for an audit. What they found confirmed what many of us suspected: she had been approving shady reimbursements and writing off personal expenses as HOA costs. Things like landscaping that was never done, printing charges for non-existent flyers, and even a catered lunch billed as a board meeting expense. It didn't take long before the board reported everything to the proper authorities. Karen suddenly went quiet. No more late-night emails, no more clipboard patrols, no more bogus violation letters, just silence. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood slowly started to feel like home again. The bench the elderly couple had been forced to remove, we helped them reinstall it. People started talking to each other again, kids played outside without being told their chalk drawings were a violation, and the next board election brought in fresh faces who actually listened. It felt like we'd taken back our community. As for the petition group, we didn't disband after all that. We turned it into a kind of unofficial neighborhood watch, not to report rule breakers, but to keep the HOA transparent and fair. We reviewed meeting notes, asked questions, and made sure no one could ever use the rulebook as a weapon again. That odd little clause buried in the bylaws? We revised it, so something like this couldn't happen again without better oversight. Looking back, the whole situation taught me more than I ever wanted to know about HOA politics.